Hey guys, Mr. Yisley here. So we are on to lesson number 12 in chapter 6, all about factoring. And so in our previous lessons that we've talked about, we've been working on using the AC method to factor trinomials. And we're going to continue to do that in lesson number 12. Now, as you may recall, and as we've really emphasized, the first step of the AC method is always to check for a greatest common factor. And with all the problems we've done to this point, we haven't had one. Well, now we're going to start moving into scenarios beginning in lesson number 12 where we are going to have a greatest common factor. So that will always be the first thing we check for, and then the rest of the method stays exactly the same from there on out. So we're not really going to learn any new processes or anything. We're just simply going to add in this idea of when we have a greatest common factor, how do we deal with that? So let's take a look at our first example here. Example A, we have 5x squared plus 15x plus 10. So according to the AC method, the first thing that we need to check for is a greatest common factor. Well, I noticed that all three terms do not have an x, so there's no variable in my greatest common factor. But what I do notice is all of these terms are multiples of 5. And so that tells me that I could pull out a 5. Now, I always want to check and see if there's a bigger number that I could pull out of all three of them, but I don't see one. So I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of 5. And so as we've learned about before, when we factor out a greatest common factor, we put that out front. So I'm going to put my 5 right here. Then I have my parentheses, and then I say, okay, well, what did I multiply 5 by to get to 5x squared? Well, that would be x squared. And then what did I multiply 5 by to get to 15x? Well, 5 times positive 3 equals positive 15, and then we need the x as well. And then what did I multiply positive 5 by to get to positive 10? Well, that would be positive 2. And then that's the end of my parentheses. So I factored out my greatest common factor as we learned about earlier in the chapter, and this is the trinomial that I'm left over with. Well, at this point, now we're on to step 2 of the AC method, and step 2 is to multiply A times C. So this greatest common factor that we have out front, all it's simply going to do is just keep coming down with us throughout the entirety of the problem. We're really done with using that 5 for the rest of the problem because we've already done what we needed to get it out of the problem with factoring out the greatest common factor. So now we're looking at each term and saying, all right, well, if I'm multiplying A times C, what is my A? Well, A is still found in the exact same place, directly in front of the x squared. Well, you may notice there's no coefficient, so as we've talked about before, that means it is the number 1, right? And so this number 1 right here would be my A. Let me highlight that a little bit. And then my C is this positive 2 right here. So I'm going to multiply those two terms as I would before. So 1 times positive 2 is 2. So then I'm into step 3. List the factors of AC, which is 2. Well, the only factors of 2 are 1 times 2. So that's what I need to use. And my goal is to make that be able to combine together in step 4 to make B. Well, B is positive 3. It's always found in front of the x term like before. And I know that 1 plus 2 equals 3. So that works. So here's where it's just going to look a tiny bit different in terms of we got to keep bringing this 5 down. So I'm going to bring the 5 down. And now I'm going to switch to a different style of grouping, or not grouping, but parentheses. And these are called brackets, or as I like to refer to them as big boy brackets, because they're a little bit bigger. And then we're going to break apart our B term like before. So our first term comes down as is, so x squared. Break apart this positive 3x into two terms, just like before, which are positive 1x and positive 2x. And then bring down my last term of positive 2. Now, the reason we use a different style of bracket here is because we're going to still go in step 5 and do our grouping. Right? We're going to group up our terms just like we always did before. And so once we've broken those apart, in step 5 and 6, we're going to group them up. So that's where those parentheses come back. So group the first two terms, group the second two terms. So all this does by changing that style of bracket is just make it easier to see. And so eventually they'll go back away, as you'll see. So again, as I'm rewriting, I bring the 5 down. I'm going to bring down this style of bracket, and then I'm going to factor out the greatest common factor of my first grouping. Well, the greatest common factor of x squared plus 1x is x. So working backwards, what did I multiply x by to get to x squared? Well, that's x. What did I multiply x by to get to positive 1x? Well, that's positive 1. End of that parenthesis. Then we are going to do the greatest common factor of the second. Well, I see that they don't both have an x, but they do both have a 2. So I'm going to, because the lead term is positive, bring out a positive 2. And then what did I multiply positive 2 by to get to positive 2x? Well, that would be x. And then what did I multiply positive 2 by to get to positive 2? Well, that would be positive 1, end of parentheses, and then end of my larger brackets. Now again, if we've done this correctly, these two parentheses should be the exact same, which they are. So now when I write my final answer, I'm going to bring the 5 down, and I'm going to get rid of these brackets, and we're going to go into parentheses. So my first parenthesis is x plus 1. My second parenthesis is what's left out front, so x plus 2. And there is my final answer. Now again, you may be saying, well, does it have to be in that order? Well, no, the parentheses don't necessarily have to be in that order, but our greatest common factor should always be the lead term there. So always make sure that we've got that greatest common factor out front. Don't forget to bring it down in every single line. All right, well, let's move on to example B now. We'll work through that one again and then see how we do. So again, I've got terms of 4x squared plus 32x plus 60. I'm looking for step 1 in the AC method for a greatest common factor. I don't see x's in every terms, but I do see that they're all positives, all even and positive. So I know that they're at least all divisible by 2. So I do have a greatest common factor other than 1. Right? Now, 4 only has one other term that goes into it, which is 4 itself. So does 4 go into 32? Yes, it does. Does 4 go into 60 evenly? Yes, it does. So that means that 4 is my greatest common factor. So then parentheses, working backwards, what did I multiply 4 by to get to 4x squared? Well, that would be x squared. What did I multiply 4 by to get to positive 32x? Well, 4 times positive 8 equals 32. And then there's an x right there. And then what did I multiply 4 by to get to positive 60? Well, that would be positive 15. So there's the end of my parentheses. So now we're right back into step 2, which is to multiply a times c, now that I've factored out the greatest common factor. Well, again, what is my a? Well, there's nothing listed there, so that means it's 1. So again, I need to multiply a of 1 times c. Well, my c is positive 15, so I'm going to multiply 1 times 15 as a part of step 2. So 1 times 15 is 15. Step 3, list out the factor pairs of 15. Well, that would be 1 and 15. 2 does not go in. 3 times 5 equals 15. 4 does not go in, and 5 is on my list. Well, now in step 4, our goal is to figure out which factor pair can equal b. Well, b again is right here in front of x, which is positive 8. And I know that 3 plus 5 equals positive 8. So there is the terms I'm going to use. So now we're going to go in step 5 here, and we're going to rewrite that polynomial. So bringing down my greatest common factor of 4, switching over to the bracket style of enclosures, then bring down my first term of x squared, split my positive 8x into 2 terms, which would be positive 3x and positive 5x, and then bring down my last term of positive 15, end of my brackets. Now step 6, we need to group up. So group up the first 2 terms, group up the second 2 terms, including the sign in front of that third term. And then we're going to factor out the greatest common factor. So again, I'm going to rewrite, bring down the 4, bring down the bracket style enclosure. Then what's the greatest common factor of x squared plus 3x? Well, that would be x. Well, working backwards, what did I multiply x by to get to x squared? Well, that's x. What did I multiply x by to get to positive 3x? Well, that's positive 3. Then my greatest common factor of positive 5x plus 15. Well, not x's in both of them, but there is multiples of 5, so positive 5 is my greatest common factor. Well, what did I multiply positive 5 by to get to positive 5x? Well, that would be x. What did I multiply positive 5 by to get to positive 15? Well, that would be positive 3. End of that grouping, end of my brackets. Now again, if we did this correctly, the parentheses should be the same, which they are. So now we're going to write our final answer. So bring down my greatest common factor of 4. X plus 3 is my first parenthesis. What's left out front? X plus 5 is my second parenthesis. All right, well, now I would encourage you to try example C on your own, then check your answer with mine. So example C, we've got 3x squared plus 27x plus 54. So I notice not all of them have x's on them, but I do know right off the bat that 3 and 27 have a common factor of 3. So really all I need to do is check and see if 54 has a common factor of 3. Now I'm not sure off the top of my head, so I'm just going to do some quick division. So 54 divided by 3. 3 goes into 5 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. Subtract that. I'm left with 2. Bring down the 4, 24. 3 goes into 24 8 times. 8 times 3 is 24. 0, so 18. So 3 times 18. So we do have a greatest common factor of 3. So if you're not sure, you can always check just like I did. So greatest common factor is 3, so we're going to factor that out first. That's step 1 of the AC method. Then figure out what's left after that. So 3 times what equals 3x squared? Well, 3 times x squared equals 3x squared. What did I multiply 3 by to get to 27x? Well, 3 times 9 equals 27, and then x, bring that down. And then as we just said, 3 times 18 equaled 54, so that would be positive 18 right there. All right, so now we factored out greatest common factor. So now we're moving on to step 2, which is multiply a times c. Well, a again is in front of x squared. There's nothing listed, so that makes it a 1. And we're going to multiply 1 times 18. 1 times 18 is 18. Step 3, list out the factor pairs. Well, 1 times 18. 2 goes in for 2 times 9. 3 goes in for 3 times 6. 4 does not go evenly into 18, 5 does not go evenly into 18, and 6 is on our list, so our list is complete. Now, step 4, we're looking for which of those factor pairs can combine together to make B, which in this case is positive 9. Well, that would be 3 plus 6 equals positive 9, so that's what we're going to use. So now time to rewrite, bring down our greatest common factor of 3, switch to the other style of brackets, bring down the x squared as is, split the positive 9x into 2 terms, which are positive 3x and positive 6x, bring down our last term of positive 18, end of the brackets. So step 6 here, now we are going to group them up. So first 2 together, second 2 terms together, and factor out the greatest common factor of each grouping. So again, we're going to rewrite, bring down the 3, bring down the bracket. Greatest common factor of x squared plus 3x is x. What did I multiply x by to get to x squared? That's x. What did I multiply x by to get to positive 3x? Well, that's positive 3. Then greatest common factor of positive 6x plus 18. Well, that is positive 6. What did I multiply positive 6 by to get to positive 6x? Well, that's x. What did I multiply positive 6 by to get to positive 18? Well, that's positive 3. Into parentheses, into brackets. Again, if we did this correct, these parentheses should be the same, which they are. So last step, rewrite, bring down our greatest common factor of 3. First parenthesis is our x plus 3. Second parenthesis is what's left over, x plus 6. All right, well that is how we factor when we have a greatest common factor other than 1. So if you have any additional questions on that, please let me know. Otherwise, you should have what you need to continue on to lesson number 13.